The notification sound from my husband's phone pierced the quiet Sunday afternoon like a gunshot. Nathaniel had gone to take a shower, leaving his phone face up on our marble kitchen counter. I wouldn't normally look. I've always respected his privacy during our 8 years of marriage. But something made me glance over. Perhaps it was intuition, or maybe just the universe giving me a chance to see what had been happening right under my nose. The message preview on his locked screen made my blood run cold. Can't wait for our weekend getaway at your country house. Make sure your wife doesn't suspect anything. I stood frozen, holding my coffee mug so tightly my knuckles turned white. In that single moment, everything I thought I knew about my life shattered like glass. I've always prided myself on being level-headed. It's what makes me good at my job as a corporate attorney. While every instinct screamed at me to confront Nathaniel immediately, to storm into the bathroom and demand answers, I took a deep breath instead. I needed evidence. I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with before making my next move. My hands trembled as I picked up his phone. After 8 years together, I knew his password, his birth year followed by mine. How ironic that a symbol of our union would now give me access to his betrayal. The message was from someone saved as LK. Hospital, obviously a cover for whoever this woman was. I scrolled through their conversation history, each message like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. They'd been seeing each other for 2 months. 2 months of lies, of Nathaniel coming home late claiming to work, of weekend business trips that were actually rendezvous with her. And now, they were planning to spend the upcoming weekend at our country house, a place we had bought together 3 years ago as our special retreat from the city, the place where we had talked about starting a family someday. I heard the shower turn off and quickly placed his phone exactly as I'd found it, retreating to our home office with my heart pounding. I needed time to think, to plan. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. Nathaniel emerged from our bedroom 20 minutes later, dressed casually in the blue sweater I had given him last Christmas. He smiled at me, the same smile that used to make my heart skip a beat, but now made my stomach churn with disgust. "I'm heading out to meet the guys for golf," he said, kissing me on the forehead. Another lie. "Don't wait up for dinner. We might grab something after." I smiled back, a performance worthy of an Academy Award. "Have fun, honey. Text me if you'll be really late." The moment the door closed behind him, I collapsed into my chair, finally allowing the tears to fall. But I only gave myself 5 minutes to cry. Then I wiped my face, straightened my shoulders, and opened my laptop. If I was going to confront this situation, I would do it on my terms, with all the facts at my disposal. First, I needed to know who LK was. It didn't take long to find her. Nathaniel's email password was the same as his phone, and his calendar revealed multiple lunch meetings with someone named Lorelei Kensington. A quick search confirmed she was a cardiac surgeon at the hospital where Nathaniel's investment firm had recently helped finance a new wing. I found her professional profile, complete with a photograph of a stunning brunette with piercing green eyes. She was beautiful, I had to admit, younger than me by a couple of years, and with the polished look of someone who took great care with her appearance. But that wasn't all I found. Lorelei Kensington was married. Her social media, though limited, showed photos of her with a tall, distinguished-looking man identified as Declan Hargrove, an architecture professor at the local university. My mind raced with possibilities. Did Declan know his wife was having an affair? Was he sitting at home right now, blissfully unaware just as I had been hours ago? I dug deeper, finding Declan's email address from the university's public directory. My legal training kicked in. I needed to approach this carefully. I drafted an email, deleted it, then drafted another. Finally, I settled on something simple. "Mr. Hargrove, I believe we need to talk about our spouses. Please call me at this number if you're willing to have this conversation." I included my cell number and hit send before I could second-guess myself. The wait was excruciating. I paced our apartment, alternating between rage, heartbreak, and a strange sense of numbness. When my phone finally rang 2 hours later, I almost dropped it in my haste to answer. "This is Declan Hargrove," said a deep, steady voice. "I received your email. What's this about our spouses?" I took a deep breath. "My name is Vivian Thornton. I'm Nathaniel Thornton's wife. I have reason to believe he's having an affair with your wife, Lorelei." The silence that followed felt eternal. Then, "I've had my suspicions for a while now, but I didn't want to believe it." His voice cracked slightly, betraying the composed facade. "Do you have proof?" "Text messages, calendar entries. They're planning to spend this weekend together at our country house." My voice sounded distant, as though someone else was speaking through me. Another long pause. "What are you proposing, Mrs. Thornton?" The plan formed in my mind with perfect clarity. "I think we should be there to greet them when they arrive, together." "You want to confront them?" He sounded uncertain. "I want them to know that we know. I want to see their faces when they realize their perfect little fantasy is over." The cold determination in my voice surprised even me. "Are you in?" By the time we ended the call an hour later, we had a plan. The country house was a 3-hour drive from the city, nestled in a wooded area with no neighbors for miles. According to the messages I'd read, Nathaniel and Lorelei planned to arrive Friday evening. Declan and I would get there earlier and wait for them. The next 3 days passed in a blur. I maintained my normal routine, going to work, making dinner, kissing Nathaniel goodbye in the mornings. I played the role of unsuspecting wife perfectly while gathering more evidence. I copied financial statements showing expensive gifts charged to our joint credit card, forwarded emails between them to my personal account, and documented everything methodically as if preparing for the most important case of my career. In a way, I was. On Friday morning, Nathaniel kissed me goodbye with the same lie he'd been telling for weeks. "Big client meeting upstate. I'll be back Sunday night." He had packed a weekend bag the night before, and I had pretended not to notice the new cologne he'd purchased or the underwear that I'd never seen before. "Drive safely," I said, smiling through my nausea. "I love you." "Love you too, Viv," he replied, not meeting my eyes. 2 hours later, I was on the road heading to our country house, my own weekend bag packed with everything I needed, including printouts of all the evidence I'd collected. Declan and I had agreed to meet at a diner a few miles from the house before proceeding together. My stomach was in knots as I pulled into the parking lot and spotted him sitting in a booth by the window, just as he'd described. In person, Declan Hargrove was even more imposing than in photographs, tall with broad shoulders, dark hair threaded with silver at the temples, and eyes that reflected the same pain and determination I felt. We shook hands like business associates about to embark on a difficult but necessary venture. "Are you ready for this?" he asked as we sat across from each other, coffee untouched between us. I nodded, finding strange comfort in sharing this moment with the only other person who could possibly understand what I was feeling. "I've been ready since the moment I saw that text message. The question is, are you?" He looked down at his wedding band, twisting it absently. "Lorelei told me she has a medical conference this weekend. 8 years of marriage, and she looked me right in the eyes and lied." He looked up, his gaze hardening. "So yes, I'm ready." We drove separately to the house, parking our cars where they wouldn't be immediately visible from the driveway. Using my key, I let us in. The familiar scent of pine and cinnamon, usually so comforting, now making me sick. Together, Declan and I sat at the kitchen table and waited for the sound of tires on gravel that would signal the beginning of the end of our marriages as we knew them. "What will you do after?" Declan asked quietly, breaking the heavy silence. I considered the question, realizing I hadn't thought beyond this moment of confrontation. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I know I deserve better than lies." "We both do." He nodded, reaching across the table to briefly squeeze my hand in solidarity. "Then, let's make sure they know exactly what they're losing." The sun began its descent behind the trees, casting long shadows across the wooden floors of the house that had once represented happiness, and now felt like the stage for the final act of a tragedy I never saw coming. As the afternoon faded into evening, Declan and I settled into an uneasy vigil. The country house felt different now, tainted by the knowledge of what Nathaniel had planned to do here. I walked through the rooms, touching familiar objects, and wondering how many other lies were woven into the fabric of my marriage. Had there been others before Lorelei? How long would this affair have continued if I hadn't seen that notification? "Your home is beautiful," Declan said, standing in the doorway of the great room with its wall of windows overlooking the lake. Lorelei and I talked about buying a place like this, something away from the city where we could eventually raise children. The mention of children sent a sharp pain through my chest. "That was our plan too," I said quietly. "We've been trying for the past 2 years. Or at least, I thought we were." Declan's expression softened with understanding. Lorelei kept putting it off, always after the next promotion, or when my schedule is less demanding. I never pushed because I respected her career, but now I wonder if she ever intended to start a family with me at all. We fell into conversation with surprising ease, two strangers connected by the most painful of circumstances. I learned that Declan had met Lorelei during her residency when he was designing an addition to the medical school. He spoke of their early days with a wistfulness that made my heart ache, describing how they would meet for coffee between her grueling shifts, how he would bring her favorite pastries to the hospital when she was working overnight. They had married after a whirlwind 6-month courtship, both certain they had found their soulmate. "When did things change?" I asked, pouring us each a glass of wine from a bottle I'd found in the kitchen, one Nathaniel had been saving for a special occasion. This seemed as appropriate a time as any to open it. Declan accepted the glass, staring into the deep red liquid as if it might contain answers. "Gradually, then suddenly. Isn't that how these things always happen? The past year, she's been more distant, always on her phone, smiling at messages that she'd quickly hide when I entered the room, working later and later." He took a long sip. I told myself it was the pressure of her job, that I was being paranoid. "You weren't paranoid," I said, the bitterness in my voice surprising me. "You were just trusting, like I was." We shared stories of our marriages as the darkness gathered outside. I told him how Nathaniel and I had met at a charity gala. I was representing my law firm, and he was there courting potential investors. How he had pursued me relentlessly, sending flowers to my office every day for a week, until I agreed to have dinner with him. How sure I had been that we would grow old together. He told me once that he'd never believed in soulmates until he met me. I said, fighting back tears. I wonder if he used the same line on Lorelei. The crunch of tires on gravel silenced us both. Headlights swept across the windows, illuminating the room momentarily before plunging it back into shadow. My heart hammered against my ribs as car doors slammed, followed by laughter. Nathaniel's familiar chuckle and a woman's lighter tones. Declan and I exchanged a glance, moving into position as we'd planned. I turned on a single lamp in the living room, casting just enough light to see, but not enough to be immediately noticed from the entryway. We sat side by side on the sofa facing the door, two judges prepared to render verdict on the guilty. The key turned in the lock. I heard Nathaniel's voice, low and intimate. "Welcome to our weekend paradise. I've been dreaming about having you here." A woman, Lorelei, giggled in response. "Are you sure we're alone? No nosy neighbors or surprise visits from the wife?" "Completely alone," Nathaniel assured her as they stepped into the house. "Vivian thinks I'm at a client meeting upstate. She never checks up on me." They moved into the entryway, Nathaniel carrying their bags, Lorelei clutching a bottle of champagne. They were so engrossed in each other they didn't notice us immediately. I observed them with a strange detachment. My husband with his arm around another woman's waist, looking at her the way he used to look at me. Lorelei was even more striking in person than in photographs, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders, her green eyes bright with excitement. They looked like the perfect couple. and the realization sent a wave of nausea through me. Nathaniel flipped on the main light switch, and that's when they saw us. The champagne bottle slipped from Lorelai's grasp, shattering on the hardwood floor in a spray of glass and foam. Nathaniel froze, his face draining of color. "Vivian? What? What are you doing here?" His eyes darted to Declan, confusion momentarily outweighing panic. "Who is this?" I smiled, amazed at how calm I felt now that the moment had arrived. "Honey, I'd like you to meet Declan Hargrove, Lorelai's husband." We thought it was time the four of us had a little chat. Lorelai made a sound somewhere between a gasp and a sob, her hand flying to her mouth. "Declan? How? Why are you here?" Her eyes, wide with fear, moved between her husband and me. "What is this?" "Please, come in," I said, gesturing to the two armchairs across from us. "You've come all this way for a weekend getaway. The least we can do is offer you a drink." Neither of them moved. Nathaniel's shock was quickly morphing into anger, a defense mechanism I'd seen him employ in arguments before. "This is completely inappropriate. You had no right to ambush us like this." Declan spoke for the first time, his voice level but edged with steel. "No, right? That's interesting, coming from the man sleeping with my wife." "Declan, please," Lorelai whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. "It's not what you think." "Isn't it?" I interjected. "Because I think it's exactly what it looks like. You and my husband have been having an affair for 2 months. You've been meeting at hotels, having lunch dates that extended well into the afternoon, and now you are planning a romantic weekend at our house, the house that Nathaniel and I bought together, that we decorated together, where we talked about raising our children." Nathaniel took a step toward me, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Vivian, let me explain." "Sit down," I commanded, surprising even myself with the authority in my voice. "Both of you, sit down, or we walk out that door and go straight to your hospital board, Lorelai, and your clients, Nathaniel, with evidence of your affair. I'm sure they'd be fascinated to learn how you've been conducting yourselves." That got their attention. Slowly, reluctantly, they moved to the armchairs, sitting stiffly on the edges like children summoned to the principal's office. Nathaniel ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit I'd once found endearing. "How long have you known?" he asked quietly. "Long enough," I replied. "Your passcode hasn't changed since our wedding day, Nate. Not very security-conscious for an investment banker." He flinched at that, the implications settling in. "You went through my phone? My emails?" "Yes," I admitted without a trace of remorse. "And Declan has been noticing things too, haven't you?" Declan nodded, his gaze fixed on Lorelai. "The late nights, the conference calls that couldn't be interrupted, the sudden need for new lingerie that I never saw." He leaned forward slightly. "Did you think I was stupid, Lorelai? Or just that I didn't care enough to notice?" Lorelai's composure cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks, leaving tracks in her perfect makeup. "It just happened, Declan. We didn't plan it. We never meant to hurt either of you." "Spare us the cliches," I said coldly. "Affairs don't just happen. You made choices, hundreds of them. Every text, every lie about where you were, every night you spent together was a choice to betray the people who loved you." "What do you want from us?" Nathaniel asked, a hint of his business negotiator tone creeping in. "Is this about money? Because if it's a divorce you want, Vivian, we can handle it like adults without this theatrical production." I laughed, the sound harsh and unfamiliar to my own ears. "This isn't a negotiation, Nate. This is a reckoning. We want you to sit there and listen while we tell you exactly what we know, exactly how we found out, and exactly what we plan to do about it." And so we did. For the next hour, Declan and I laid out the evidence methodically. The text messages, the credit card receipts, the calendar entries deliberately mislabeled. I watched Nathaniel's face as his carefully constructed lies collapsed one by one. Lorelai alternated between crying silently and staring at the floor, unable to meet Declan's eyes. "But what I really want to know," I said finally, "is what you told each other about us, about your spouses. I'm curious what narrative you created to justify all this." Nathaniel and Lorelei exchanged uncomfortable glances, neither willing to speak first. "I'll go first then," I continued. "I found your drafts folder, Nate. The emails you wrote to her but were too cautious to send. You told her I was cold, ambitious, that I cared more about my career than starting a family, that we hadn't been intimate in months." Each word felt like acid on my tongue. "You conveniently left out the part where I've been going to fertility treatments twice a week for the past year, where I rearranged my entire work schedule to accommodate your preferences, where I've been trying everything possible to conceive the child you claim to want." Nathaniel had the decency to look ashamed. "Vivian, Your turn, Lorelei," Declan interrupted, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "What convenient fiction did you create about me?" Lorelei wiped her tears with trembling fingers. "I never said anything bad about you, Declan. I swear." "Liar," I said quietly. "You told my husband that Declan was controlling, that he monitored your movements and checked your phone, that he wanted you to quit medicine to have babies." I pulled out my phone and read directly from a message I'd found. "He doesn't understand me like you do, Nate. He never has." Declan's face contorted with pain. "Controlling? I've supported every career move you've made, Lorelei. I designed your home office myself so you could work whenever you needed to. I've never once asked you to check in or questioned where you were going." He shook his head in disbelief. "And as for children, you were the one who brought it up first, who showed me nursery designs and talked about names. I've only ever followed your lead." A heavy silence fell over the room. Outside, rain had begun to fall, pattering against the windows like an accompaniment to our shattered marriages. "So, you've confronted us," Nathaniel said finally. "You've made your point. What happens now?" I exchanged a look with Declan before answering. "Now, we decide how this ends, and those decisions are ours to make, not yours." Lorelei looked up, fear evident in her eyes. "What does that mean?" "It means," Declan explained, his voice suddenly weary, "that actions have consequences, and it's time for both of you to face yours." The rain intensified, drumming against the roof as lightning illuminated the room in brief, harsh flashes. The storm outside was nothing compared to the tempest of emotions within these walls. 4 people whose lives had become inextricably tangled through lies, betrayal, and the painful truth that was now impossible to ignore. Lightning flashed again, throwing harsh shadows across Nathaniel's face. In that brief illumination, I saw something I hadn't expected. Genuine fear. Not just the panic of being caught, but something deeper. For the first time since I'd known him, my husband looked truly vulnerable. "I want a divorce," I said, the words emerging with surprising steadiness. "I've already spoken to Caroline Winters at my firm." Caroline was one of the most feared divorce attorneys in the state, known for her ruthlessness in high-profile cases. "She'll be contacting you on Monday." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "You can't be serious. You're willing to throw away 8 years of marriage over one mistake?" "One mistake?" I repeated incredulously. "This wasn't a drunken one-night stand, Nathaniel. This was a calculated affair. You created a fake contact in your phone. You invented business trips. You planned to bring your mistress to our home." I leaned forward, meeting his gaze directly. "And by the way, that investment you made last month from our joint account? The one you said was for a startup?" I traced it. $25,000 for a diamond bracelet from Tiffany's. I turned to Lorelei. "I hope you enjoyed it. It cost me a lot more than money." Lorelei paled, her hand instinctively moving to her wrist, where a delicate bracelet glinted in the lamplight. "I didn't know," she whispered. "He told me it was from his personal account." "We don't have personal accounts," I informed her coldly. "Everything has been joint since we married. That was his idea, actually. No secrets between us." Ironic, isn't it? Declan had been silent, watching Lorelei with an expression I couldn't quite read. Now he spoke, his voice low and controlled. I haven't decided what I'm going to do yet. Unlike you two, I don't make life-altering decisions on impulse." He turned to his wife. "But I do have questions, and I expect honest answers. Starting with how long this would have continued if you hadn't been caught." Lorelei shook her head helplessly. "I don't know. We never discussed." "We had an end date," Nathaniel interrupted, surprising all of us. "After the Johnson merger closed next month, I was going to end it." He couldn't meet my eyes as he spoke. It was never meant to be permanent. The casual cruelty of his words struck me like a physical blow. "So that's supposed to make it better? That you had scheduled when to discard your mistress and return to your unsuspecting wife?" "I never stopped loving you, Vivian," he said, desperation creeping into his voice. "This thing with Lorelei, it was an escape. Work has been crushing me, and the pressure with the fertility treatments, I just needed something that felt easy." "Easy," I repeated, the word bitter on my tongue. While I was injecting hormones into my stomach every night, tracking my temperature every morning, scheduling sex like it was a business meeting, all because you said you wanted a family. You were looking for something easy? Lorelei shifted uncomfortably. "Nathaniel, you never told me about fertility treatments." "There's a lot he didn't tell you," I said. "Just like there's probably a lot you didn't tell him. That's the thing about affairs. They're built on selective truths. You both created fantasies of each other that had nothing to do with reality." Thunder rumbled overhead, as if emphasizing my point. The storm had intensified, rain now lashing against the windows with angry persistence. "We should discuss this in the morning," Nathaniel suggested, glancing toward the door as if contemplating escape. "It's late, and emotions are running high." "We're not finished," Declan stated firmly. "You don't get to decide when this conversation ends. Not anymore." Something in his tone made Lorelei look up sharply. "Declan, what do you want me to say? That I made a terrible mistake? I did? That I'm sorry? I am. More than I can express. I want you to tell me why," he said simply. "Not the excuses or the justifications. The real reason you were willing to throw away our marriage." Lorelei's composure finally broke completely. Tears streamed down her face as she struggled to speak. "I was afraid," she admitted, her voice barely audible above the storm. "Afraid of disappointing you. Afraid of failing as a wife, as a potential mother. Every time you mentioned children, all I could think about was how I'd have to scale back at work, how I might lose the career I've fought so hard for. So instead of talking to me about your fears, you decided sleeping with another woman's husband was the solution." Declan's voice was incredulous. "Nathaniel understood the pressure I was under," she said. "He didn't make demands or have expectations. With him, I could just be myself, without feeling like I was letting someone down." "And what exactly were these oppressive demands I made?" Declan asked, the hurt evident beneath his controlled exterior. "When did I ever ask you to choose between your career and our family?" Lorelei couldn't answer, the reality of her actions seemingly hitting her for the first time. I turned to Nathaniel, a new question forming. "Did you ever actually want children with me, Nate? Or was that just another lie?" He hesitated, which was answer enough. "You didn't, did you?" I pressed. "All those doctor's appointments, all those treatments, all those nights I cried because I thought something was wrong with me. And you never even wanted a baby in the first place." "I thought I did," he said quietly. "When we first talked about it, the idea seemed right, what we were supposed to do next. But then, when it didn't happen right away, and you became so focused on it—" "Of course I was focused on it," I exclaimed. "We were trying to create a life together, something I thought we both wanted more than anything." An uncomfortable silence filled the room, broken only by the continuing storm outside. In that silence, something shifted between us, the last threads of connection severing as the full weight of his betrayal sank in. It wasn't just the affair. It was the years of pretending to want the same future I did. "There's something else you should know," Lorelei said suddenly, looking not at Declan, but at me. "I'm pregnant." The world seemed to stop. For a moment, I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Nathaniel's face went completely white. "It's not what you're thinking," she continued quickly, turning to Declan. "It's yours, Declan. I'm 6 weeks along. I only found out last week, and I was going to tell you after I ended things with Nathaniel this weekend." Declan stared at her in disbelief. "You're pregnant with my child, and you came here for a weekend with your lover?" Nathaniel looked equally stunned. "You never said anything about being pregnant." "I was going to tell you both the truth this weekend," Lorelei insisted, desperation in her voice. "Declan, I realized I couldn't keep living this lie. I want our family, our future. This affair was a mistake, the biggest mistake of my life." "Convenient timing," I observed coldly. "You have an attack of conscience right when you find out you're carrying Declan's child?" "It's the truth," she pleaded. "Declan, you have to believe me. I never stopped loving you." Declan's expression was unreadable as he processed this new information. The revelation hung in the air between us, changing everything and nothing simultaneously. "How can I possibly believe anything you say now?" he finally asked, his voice raw with emotion. "How can I trust that this child is even mine?" "We can do a paternity test," Lorelei offered immediately. "I'll do whatever it takes to prove I'm telling the truth about this at least." I watched this exchange with a strange detachment, as if observing characters in a play, rather than real people whose lives were imploding alongside my own. The irony wasn't lost on me, that Lorelei was pregnant with her husband's child, while my own womb remained stubbornly empty despite years of trying with a man who apparently never truly wanted to be a father. "I need some air," I announced abruptly, standing up. No one tried to stop me as I walked to the kitchen and out onto the covered porch at the back of the house. The rain was still coming down in sheets, but the overhang kept me dry as I gulped in the cool night air. I don't know how long I stood there, watching lightning illuminate the lake in brief, brilliant flashes, before I heard the door open behind me. I expected Nathaniel, come to offer more excuses or plead for another chance. Instead, Declan stepped out, his tall frame silhouetted against the light from the kitchen. "I'm sorry," he said simply, coming to stand beside me at the railing. "About the baby. I know how much you wanted children." "Congratulations," I replied, surprised to find I meant it. Despite everything, the news of new life didn't deserve bitterness. Children are a blessing, no matter the circumstances. He nodded, his profile stoic against the storm. "I don't know what to believe anymore. Whether the baby is really mine, whether she ever loved me, whether anything in our marriage was real." "I understand that feeling," I said softly. "It's like waking up and realizing your entire life was a carefully constructed illusion." We stood in companionable silence for a while, two strangers connected by shared pain. There was something oddly comforting about his presence. No need for explanations or pretense. He understood exactly what I was going through because he was living it too. "What will you do?" he asked eventually. "After the divorce?" I considered the question, looking out at the dark water. "Start over. Sell this house. I could never come back here now anyway. Focus on my career. Learn who I am without Nathaniel, because I realize I've been defining myself as his wife for so long that I'm not sure I know anymore." "You're a remarkable woman, Vivian," Declan said, turning to face me. "The way you've handled this, with such dignity and strength. Nathaniel is a fool." "So is Lorelei," I replied. "But their foolishness has given us an opportunity, as painful as it is, the opportunity to find something better, something real." A particularly loud crack of thunder made us both jump, then laugh despite ourselves. A small moment of levity in the midst of chaos. "We should go back in," I said reluctantly. "Finish what we started." Declan nodded, but before we could move, the kitchen door opened again, and Nathaniel stepped out. His eyes narrowed slightly at the sight of us standing together. "Vivian, can we talk? Alone?" His voice held a note of urgency I hadn't heard before. I glanced at Declan, who nodded and moved past Nathaniel into the house, leaving us alone on the porch. "What is it, Nate?" I asked wearily. He stepped closer, his expression more vulnerable than I'd seen it in years. "I know I've destroyed everything," he began. "I know you probably hate me right now, and you have every right to. But I need you to know that I do love you. I always have." "Love isn't enough," I said. "Not when there's no trust, no honesty." "I know that," he admitted. "I'm not asking for forgiveness or another chance. He hesitated, then continued. "I just wanted to tell you that you deserve better than what I gave you. You deserve someone who appreciates your strength, your intelligence, your heart. Someone who wants the same things you do, who would never make you doubt yourself the way I did." I studied his face, trying to determine if this was genuine remorse or another manipulation. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because it's true," he said simply, "and because despite everything, I do want you to be happy, even if it can't be with me." The rain began to ease, the storm moving off as suddenly as it had arrived. In its wake, an odd calm settled over me. Not peace exactly, but the quiet clarity that comes after making a difficult but necessary decision. "Thank you for saying that," I replied, "but my happiness isn't your concern anymore. It's mine, and for the first time in a long time, I'm going to put myself first." I moved past him toward the door, ready to face whatever came next. As I reached for the handle, I paused, turning back to him one last time. "You know what the saddest part is, Nate? We could have had something beautiful if you'd just been honest, about not wanting children, about your doubts, about everything. I loved you enough to hear those truths, hard as they might have been, but you never gave me the chance." I left him standing there, his silhouette small and solitary against the vast darkness beyond the porch. Inside, the confrontation we had begun would continue until everything was laid bare, every lie exposed, every secret revealed. But somehow I knew that the hardest part was already behind me. I had survived the initial shock, the heartbreak, the rage. What remained was the long, difficult work of rebuilding. A prospect that, for the first time, filled me with determination rather than dread. Back in the living room, Lorelei sat alone, her face buried in her hands. She looked up when I entered, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "Where's Declan?" I asked, glancing around. "Upstairs," she said, her voice hoarse. "He said he needed some time to think." She hesitated, then added, "Vivian, I know you have no reason to do me any favors, but please, could you talk to him? He listens to you." I stared at her incredulously. "You expect me to advocate for you, after what you've done?" She shook her head quickly. "No, not advocate. Just, I don't know. He respects you. The way you've handled all this, maybe he'll believe the truth about the baby if it comes from someone else." "And why should I believe it's the truth?" I countered, sitting down across from her. "You've been lying to your husband for months. Why start being honest now?" Lorelei looked down at her hands, twisted tightly in her lap. "Because I have nothing left to lose. Because I realized, sitting here tonight, what I've thrown away for. For what? Some fantasy that was never going to last?" She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "I never meant to hurt you, Vivian. I know that sounds hollow, but it's true. In my mind, you were this abstract concept, Nathaniel's wife. I never thought about you as a real person with feelings, with dreams." She paused, with a desire for children that matched my own fear of having them. Her words hit closer to home than I wanted to admit. Hadn't I done the same with her at first? Reduced her to the other woman? A two-dimensional villain in my marriage's tragedy? "The baby is Declan's," she continued when I didn't respond. "I've only been with Nathaniel a handful of times, and we were always careful. Declan and we weren't trying, but there was one night about 6 weeks ago. We'd both been drinking wine, celebrating his department award. It was the first time in months that we'd connected like we used to. Howdy! The irony of her situation wasn't lost on me. pregnant from a rare intimate night with her husband while carrying on an affair with mine. Life had a twisted sense of humor sometimes. I found out last week, she went on. I took 3 tests because I couldn't believe it. I'd convinced myself I wasn't ready for motherhood, that my career wouldn't allow it. But when I saw that positive result, her voice broke. I felt something I never expected. Joy, pure joy. And then immediate guilt because of what I'd been doing with Nathaniel. So, you were planning to end it with him this weekend? I asked skeptically. She nodded. I was going to tell him the truth, that I was pregnant with Declan's baby, that I wanted to recommit to my marriage and become the mother I suddenly realized I wanted to be. She laughed bitterly. I had this whole speech prepared. Instead, I walked into an ambush that I completely deserved. Nathaniel came in from the porch then, his eyes moving between Lorelei and me with uncertainty. He looked defeated, the confident man I'd married nowhere to be seen. We should go, he said to Lorelei. I'll drive you back to the city. We've done enough damage here. No, I said firmly, surprising myself as much as them. No one is leaving until we've resolved this completely. There's no running away from the mess you've made. Lorelei looked alarmed. Declan and I need to talk privately. Please, Vivian, let us go home and sort through this ourselves. You'll have plenty of time for private conversations after tonight, I assured her. But right now, we're finishing what we started. All 4 of us. As if on cue, Declan descended the stairs, his face composed, but his eyes still reflecting the turmoil within. He'd changed into dry clothes, a t-shirt and jeans he must have brought in his overnight bag, and the casual attire somehow made him look more vulnerable, less the distinguished professor, and more a man whose world had been upended. I've been thinking, he announced without preamble, about what happens next, about the baby. He turned to Lorelei. I want a paternity test. Not because I don't believe you, but because I need to be certain. I need that concrete proof to move forward, whatever direction that might be. Lorelei nodded quickly. Of course, whatever you need. And I want us to try counseling, he continued, causing her eyes to widen in surprise. Not because I'm ready to forgive or forget, but because there's potentially a child involved now. Our child. And he or she deserves parents who have at least attempted to heal what's broken between them. The relief on Lorelei's face was palpable. Yes, she whispered. Yes, to all of it. I watched this exchange with mixed emotions. Part of me envied them this possible path to reconciliation. A path that wasn't available to Nathaniel and me, nor one I would choose even if it were. Another part felt a strange satisfaction in witnessing what might be the first steps toward redemption for at least one of the marriages shattered here tonight. What about you two? Declan asked, turning to Nathaniel and me. Nathaniel looked at me uncertainly. Vivian has made her position clear. She wants a divorce. And you? I challenged him. What do you want, Nate? Not what you're resigning yourself to, but what you actually want. He seemed taken aback by the question. I don't know anymore. I thought I knew what I wanted when I started this affair, but now, he trailed off, looking lost. Everything I thought I wanted seems hollow, including the freedom I thought I was seeking with Lorelei. That's because it was hollow, I said. You weren't looking for love or even passion. You were looking for escape, from responsibility, from adulthood, from the consequences of your own choices. The realization crystallized as I spoke it. You didn't want children because they would have tied you down even more. They would have made it harder to maintain this illusion of freedom you've been chasing. Nathaniel didn't deny it. Maybe you're right, he admitted. Maybe I've been running from growing up since the day we met. You were always the mature one, the responsible one. I think that's why I was drawn to you. You made me feel stable, grounded, until that stability felt like a prison. I finished for him. He nodded slowly. But it wasn't you who built the prison, Vivian. It was me, my own expectations, my own fears. He looked at me with genuine regret. I'm sorry I blamed you for my own limitations. You deserved better. The apology, unexpected and apparently sincere, caught me off guard. For a brief moment, I glimpsed the man I'd fallen in love with, thoughtful, self-aware, capable of genuine connection. But that glimpse only reinforced my decision. That man had been buried too long beneath layers of deception and selfishness. Whatever journey of self-discovery Nathaniel needed to undertake, it wasn't my responsibility to guide him through it. I appreciate that, I said finally, but it doesn't change where we are or what needs to happen next. Seat, which is what, exactly? Lorelei asked, looking between Declan and me. I took a deep breath, mentally organizing the practical steps that would follow this night. In the morning, we'll all leave. Declan and Lorelei, you'll go home and begin whatever process you decide is right for your family. Nathaniel, you'll check into a hotel. I'll stay with my sister until you've had time to move your things out of our apartment. And then? Nathaniel asked quietly. And then we live our separate lives, I said simply. We let our lawyers handle the divorce. We divide our assets fairly. We make this as painless as possible for everyone involved, because there's been enough pain already. Declan nodded in agreement. That seems reasonable. He turned to Lorelei. We'll do the same, though our path forward might be different. First the paternity test, then counseling if the results confirm what you've said. Lorelei reached for his hand hesitantly. To my surprise, he didn't pull away, though he didn't return the gesture either. A small opening, perhaps, but significant given the circumstances. There's one more thing, I said, turning to Nathaniel. Our fertility treatments. I've decided to continue them. His eyebrows shot up in surprise. By yourself? As a single mother? Yes, I said firmly. I've wanted a child for years, Nate. That hasn't changed just because our marriage has failed. I have the resources, the support system, and, most importantly, the love to give. I don't need a partner who's only half committed to make that dream come true. Nathaniel looked stunned, but didn't argue. If that's what you want, I won't stand in your way. I know you won't, I said confidently, because despite everything, you're not a cruel person, just a lost one. The conversation gradually shifted to practical matters. Sleeping arrangements for the night. Nathaniel and Lorelei would take the 2 guest rooms. Declan and I would share the master bedroom platonically. Departure times in the morning. Next steps for each couple. The tension in the room slowly dissipated, replaced by a strange sense of resolution. Not peace, exactly, but the quiet that comes after a storm has passed, leaving destruction in its wake, but also the possibility of rebuilding. Later, as Declan and I prepared for bed, arranging pillows down the center of the king-sized mattress like an old-fashioned bundling board, he asked the question that had been hovering unspoken between us all evening. Do you think they ever really loved us? Or were we just convenient covers for their own insecurities? I considered this as I sat on the edge of the bed, my reflection in the dresser mirror looking older and wiser than it had just days ago. I think love is more complicated than we want it to be, I said finally. I believe Nathaniel loved me once, in his way, just as I think Lorelei loves you still, despite her actions. But it wasn't enough, he observed. No, I agreed. Love without honesty, without courage, without commitment. It's not enough. We fell silent, each lost in our own thoughts. I found myself wondering what might have happened if Nathaniel and I had faced our issues directly. His reluctance about fatherhood, my single-minded focus on conception. Could we have found a compromise? A path forward together? Or were we always destined to reach this breaking point? What's the first thing you'll do? Declan asked suddenly. When all this is settled, I mean. When you're officially starting your new life. I smiled, surprised to find I had an answer ready. I'm going to Italy. Florence, specifically. I've always wanted to see the art there, to walk those ancient streets. Nathaniel always put it off, said we'd go someday. I looked over at Declan. I'm done waiting for someday. What about you? He considered the question. I think I'll wait to decide until after the paternity test. If Lorelei is telling the truth, And oddly, I believe she is. Then my first priority will be preparing for this child, whether Lorelei and I stay together or not. "You'll be a wonderful father," I said, meaning it. "And you'll be a wonderful mother," he replied. However, that comes to pass. We shared a smile, two strangers who had entered this house as betrayed spouses, but would leave it as something else. Not quite friends, but allies of a sort. People who had witnessed each other's darkest moments and offered understanding rather than judgment. Outside, the storm had passed completely, leaving behind a clear night sky filled with stars. I moved to the window, gazing up at their distant light. Some of those stars, I knew, had died long ago, their light only now reaching Earth, like the final flickers of my marriage, beautiful from a distance, but already extinguished at the source. Yet new stars were being born, even as old ones died. New light generated in the darkness. As painful as this ending was, it was also a beginning. My beginning. And for the first time since seeing that fateful text message on Nathaniel's phone, I felt something like hope stirring within me. Not happiness, not yet, but the quiet certainty that happiness would come again, in time. 1 year later, the Italian sun warmed my face as I sat at a small cafe table overlooking the Arno River in Florence. My espresso had grown cold, forgotten as I lost myself in sketching the Ponte Vecchio in the small leather-bound journal I'd purchased my first day in the city. I was no artist, but during the past year, I'd discovered the joy of creating solely for myself, without concern for perfection or others' judgment. "Signora, another coffee?" The waiter approached with a gentle smile, gesturing to my untouched cup. "Sì, grazie," I replied, my Italian still halting but improving daily. This was my 3rd month in Florence. What had begun as a 2-week vacation had evolved into an extended sabbatical from my law firm. After the divorce was finalized, I'd surprised everyone, including myself, by requesting a year-long leave of absence. To recalibrate, I'd told my concerned partners. In reality, it was to rediscover who Vivian Thornton was, without the identity of wife, without the singular focus on career advancement that had defined me for so long. My phone vibrated with an incoming message. I hesitated before checking it. Part of my sabbatical had involved creating healthy boundaries with technology, but smiled when I saw it was from Meredith, my sister. "Lab called. Your numbers look fantastic. Doctor says next round has excellent chances. Call me." My heart leapt as I read her words. After 8 months of treatments as a single woman, my body was finally responding the way it should. The fertility specialist had been cautiously optimistic about this cycle, but Meredith's message suggested more than caution was warranted now. I quickly calculated the time difference, early morning in Boston, and decided to wait a few hours before calling her back. Instead, I sipped my fresh espresso and allowed myself to imagine, just for a moment, the possibility of motherhood on my own terms. A child conceived in hope rather than obligation. A family built on truth rather than compromise. The divorce had been surprisingly straightforward once the initial shock subsided. Nathaniel, perhaps motivated by guilt or simply wanting a clean break, had agreed to my terms without argument. Our joint assets were divided equitably. I kept the apartment in the city, and he took a generous cash settlement that I later heard he used to start his own investment firm. The country house, the site of our marriage's implosion, I sold without regret, using part of the proceeds to fund my Italian sojourn and the rest to continue my fertility treatments. We hadn't spoken since the finalization 6 months ago. Occasionally, I saw his name mentioned in financial publications or glimpsed his face at industry events I attended before my sabbatical. Each time, I was surprised by the absence of pain those encounters caused. Not because the hurt had completely vanished, but because it had transformed into something quieter, more contemplative, a scar rather than an open wound. I finished my coffee and paid the bill, then wandered toward the Uffizi Gallery where I had a membership that allowed me unlimited access. The gallery had become my sanctuary in Florence, a place where I could lose myself for hours among masterpieces that had witnessed centuries of human joy and suffering. Today, buoyed by Meredith's message, I felt drawn to Botticelli's Birth of Venus, that serene goddess emerging fully formed from chaos, her face peaceful despite the turbulent waters from which she rose. As I rounded the corner into the Botticelli room, I nearly collided with a tall man studying a museum map with intense concentration. "Mi scusi," I began automatically, then stopped short. "Declan?" He looked up, surprise giving way to genuine pleasure as recognition dawned. "Vivian, is that really you?" His eyes crinkled at the corners as he smiled, a feature I'd forgotten about during our brief but intense acquaintance a year ago. "In the flesh," I replied, suddenly conscious of my casual sundress and sandals, my hair loose around my shoulders instead of in the severe styles I'd favored during my attorney days. "What are you doing in Florence?" "Architectural research," he explained, gesturing to the sketchbook tucked under his arm. "I'm developing a course on Renaissance design principles and their modern applications. I've been here 2 weeks already, with another month to go." I nodded, still processing this unexpected reunion. "That sounds fascinating. I've been here 3 months myself, I paused, searching for the right words, finding my way back to myself, I suppose. Something in my phrasing must have resonated with him, because his expression softened with understanding. "Would you like to get a coffee?" he asked. "Catch up properly? Unless you're here with someone." He left the question hanging delicately. "No, I'm alone," I assured him. "And coffee sounds perfect. I know a lovely place nearby with a view of the river." As we walked through the crowded gallery and out into the sunshine, Declan filled me in on the events of his life since that fateful weekend at the country house. The paternity test had confirmed what Lorelei had claimed. The baby was indeed his. They had attempted counseling for several months, making progress in understanding the issues that had led to her affair, but ultimately deciding that too much damage had been done to rebuild their marriage. "We finalized the divorce when she was 7 months pregnant," he explained, as we settled at my favorite cafe table. "But we've developed a solid co-parenting relationship. Our daughter, Sophia, is 3 months old now." He showed me a picture on his phone, a beautiful baby with Declan's dark hair and what appeared to be Lorelei's green eyes. "She's gorgeous," I said sincerely. "How is co-parenting working out?" "Better than I expected," he admitted. "We have a detailed custody arrangement, but we're flexible with each other. Lorelei has been different since Sophia was born. More grounded, more present. Motherhood suits her in ways neither of us anticipated." "PT. And how is she otherwise?" I asked carefully, unsure how much I wanted to know about the woman who had been my husband's lover. Declan understood my hesitation. "She's well, back at work part-time. No longer seeing Nathaniel, if that's what you're wondering." He paused. I heard they continued their relationship briefly after that weekend, but it fell apart quickly once reality set in. I nodded, surprised by my lack of reaction to this information. "And what about you? Beyond fatherhood and your research, I mean?" He smiled, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. "I'm adjusting to this new normal, dating occasionally, though nothing serious yet, focused primarily on Sophia and my work." He looked up, his gaze direct. "And you? How has your year been, Vivian?" The question was simple, but it opened a floodgate of reflection. I found myself telling him everything: the quiet dignity of the divorce proceedings, the unexpected sabbatical, my travels through Italy, and finally, my ongoing fertility treatments. "In fact," I concluded, "I just received promising news this morning. My numbers look good for the next attempt." "You're still pursuing motherhood," he observed, his tone warm with admiration rather than judgment. "That takes courage." "It feels right," I said simply. After everything that happened, I realized that my desire for a child was never about Nathaniel or our marriage. It was about the kind of life I want to create, the love I have to give. I smiled ruefully, though I have to admit, doing it alone is daunting at times. The best things usually are, he replied. Sophia terrifies me daily. This tiny person completely dependent on my ability to make good decisions. But that terror is wrapped in such joy that I can hardly distinguish between the two anymore. We talked for hours, our coffee cups repeatedly emptied and refilled as the afternoon sun tracked across the sky. Declan told me about his department's latest projects, his plans for the course he was developing, his adjustment to life as a single father. I shared stories of my travels, the small apartment I'd rented in the historic center of Florence, my tentative plans to return to law, but with a different focus, perhaps family advocacy or reproductive rights. There was an ease between us that felt both familiar and entirely new. We had met under the most painful circumstances, witnessed each other at our most vulnerable. Yet here we were a year later, changed but whole, sharing a beautiful afternoon in one of the world's most romantic cities. As twilight approached, Declan glanced at his watch reluctantly. I have a dinner with some colleagues from the university here, he explained. Part of my research grant obligations. Of course, I said, reaching for my purse. It was wonderful running into you, Declan. Wait, he said quickly. Would you like to meet again? Perhaps tomorrow? I'd love to see your apartment, hear more about your experiences in Florence. I studied his face, searching for any hint of obligation or pity. Instead, I found only genuine interest and something else, a tentative hope that mirrored my own unexpected feelings. I'd like that, I replied simply. How about lunch? I know a little trattoria that makes the most amazing pappardelle with wild boar ragout. Perfect, he agreed, his smile widening. Shall we say 1 o'clock? We exchanged phone numbers and parted with a light hug that lingered just a moment longer than necessary. As I watched him walk away, I felt a curious lightness in my chest, not the butterflies of infatuation, but something more substantial. A recognition, perhaps, of possibilities I hadn't allowed myself to consider until now. Back in my apartment, I called Meredith to discuss the lab results. Her excitement was contagious as she relayed the doctor's optimism about my next treatment cycle. He said everything looks aligned perfectly this time, Viv, she reported. Your hormone levels, your egg quality, all of it. He's scheduling the procedure for when you return next month. That's wonderful news, I said, genuinely thrilled, yet also processing my unexpected encounter with Declan. My sister, always attuned to the nuances in my voice, picked up on my distraction immediately. What is it? You sound different. I ran into someone today, I admitted. Someone from before. Nathaniel? She asked sharply, her protective instincts flaring. No, I assured her. Declan Hargrove, the husband of of Lorelei. The architecture professor? The one who was with you that weekend? Meredith had been my confidant throughout the divorce, knowing every painful detail of its origins. Yes, he's in Florence doing research. We had coffee, talked for hours, actually. We're meeting again tomorrow. There was a brief silence on the line. And how do you feel about that? She asked carefully. I moved to my small balcony, gazing out at the dusky Florentine skyline with its ancient domes and towers. Honestly, I'm not sure. It was just so easy being with him. No pretenses, no need to explain the past or who I am now. He's been through the same crucible, emerged from it differently, but with similar scars. And he knows about the fertility treatments? Your plans? Yes, I told him everything. He was supportive, understanding. I hesitated, then added, he has a daughter now, with Lorelei. They're divorced, but co-parenting. Meredith absorbed this information. Life takes such strange turns, she mused. A year ago, you were both devastated by betrayal. Now you're having coffee in Florence, while he raises a child with the woman who helped destroy your marriage. When you put it that way, it sounds impossible. I laughed, but it didn't feel impossible. It felt right, somehow. Like we've both done the hard work of healing separately and can recognize that in each other. Just be careful with your heart, Viv, my sister advised gently. You've come so far this year. I will be, I promised. This might be nothing more than a friendship born from shared experience. Or it might be the universe's way of showing me that sometimes beautiful things can grow from the most painful circumstances. Either way, I'm going into it with eyes wide open. After we hung up, I stood on the balcony watching the city lights come alive as darkness fell. Florence had existed for centuries, witnessing countless human dramas, sorrows, and joys. My own story, the betrayal, the divorce, this unexpected reunion, was just one more thread in its tapestry. The next day, Declan arrived at my apartment precisely at 1 o'clock, bearing a small bouquet of sunflowers and a bottle of Tuscan wine. Our lunch extended into a walk along the Arno, which stretched into gelato in a hidden piazza, which became drinks at a rooftop bar as the sun set over the city. With each hour, the connection between us deepened. Not the desperate clinging of two wounded souls, but the measured, thoughtful interest of two people who had learned the hard way what truly mattered in relationships. I've been thinking about that weekend, Declan said as we watched the stars appear above Florence. As painful as it was, I'm grateful for it in a strange way. If Lorelei and Nathaniel hadn't been caught, who knows how long their affair would have continued? How much more damage would have been done? I nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. It forced a reckoning that was probably inevitable, and it showed me strengths in myself I didn't know existed. You were magnificent, he said quietly. I remember watching you that night, thinking that Nathaniel had no idea what he was throwing away. Our eyes met, and in that moment, something shifted between us. The past receding, the future opening with unexpected promise. When he asked if he could see me again the next day, and the day after that, I said yes without hesitation. Over the following weeks, we explored Florence together. Its hidden gardens, its lesser-known museums, its bustling markets. We talked about everything. Our childhoods, our ambitions, our fears, our hopes for the future. I shared my anxieties about becoming a single mother. He described his terror the first time he was alone with Sophia for a full weekend. We discovered shared passions for history, architecture, his profession had rubbed off on me during my time in Italy, and classical music. When it was time for me to return to Boston for my scheduled treatment, Declan drove me to the airport. As we stood at the security checkpoint, the moment heavy with unspoken possibilities, he took my hands in his. "This isn't goodbye," he said firmly. "I'll be back in the States in 3 weeks. My research here is almost complete." "And then?" I asked, allowing myself to voice the question that had been hovering between us. "And then we see where this leads," he replied, his eyes steady on mine. No pressure, no expectations, just two people who found each other in the most unlikely circumstances, discovering if there's something worth building together. "I'd like that," I said softly. He pulled me close, kissing me with a tenderness that spoke of patience, of respect for all we had endured, of hope for what might lie ahead. "Safe travels, Vivian. I'll see you soon." As the plane lifted off from Italian soil, I pressed my palm against the window, watching Florence recede beneath me. A year ago, I had boarded a different flight, from New York to this same city, broken and alone, seeking solace in art and history and distance. Now I was returning home changed, strengthened, and open to possibilities I couldn't have imagined in the depths of my pain. Whatever happened with the fertility treatment, whatever developed between Declan and me, I knew one certainty. Life moved in cycles of destruction and renewal. What had nearly destroyed me had ultimately set me free. The betrayal that had shattered my marriage had cleared the way for authentic connection, with myself first, and now, potentially, with someone who had walked a similar path of heartbreak and healing. The future was unwritten, full of both uncertainty and promise. But for the first time since that fateful text message appeared on Nathaniel's phone, I was genuinely excited to discover what came next. Not because everything was perfect or resolved, but because I had learned the most valuable lesson of all, that I was enough, on my own, whatever life brought my way. And that knowledge, hard-won through tears and rage and eventually acceptance, was worth every moment of pain that had led me here, sailing above the clouds toward home, toward possibility, toward the next chapter of a life reclaimed. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment below. What city are you watching from? And if your heart tells you to, feel free to leave me a tip on Buy Me a Coffee. Just check the first pinned comment. Thanks for keeping me company and for the coffee, and I'll see you in the next story.